The red dust of Mars swirled against the thick windows of the observation dome as Commander Jack Stone stared at the distant Earth, a tiny blue dot that none of his people had walked on for 200 years. He rubbed his tired eyes, remembering the stories his grandmother had told him about the day the Dominion ships darkened Earth's skies, the day humanity lost its home. A soft peep from his wrist computer broke his thoughts. Another problem with the shield generators. These days, something always needed fixing in Mars Colony Beta, humanity's last standing outpost. The colony's walls, once bright white, had turned rust red from 2 centuries of Martian storms. Just like the hope in people's eyes had slowly faded to tired acceptance. Jack walked through the crowded main corridor, where families lived in quarters meant for half as many people. Children played with toys made from spare parts, while their parents worked endless shifts to keep the colony systems running. The air filters hummed louder than they should, and the hydroponic gardens barely produced enough food. But they survived. That's what humans did best. In the defense control room, Jack found Anna West, their chief engineer, trying to boost power to the shield generators. Her gray hair was tied back messily, and dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept again. The old systems, built with technology from Earth, were never meant to last this long. "How bad is it?" Jack asked, looking at the complex display of numbers and warning lights. "We lost another power cell," Anna said, not looking up from her work. "That's 3 this month. We can remake them, but the rare materials." She didn't need to finish. They both knew their supplies were running low. The colony's children gathered at the education center next door, learning about an Earth they had never seen. Jack watched through the window as their teachers showed them pictures of oceans and forests. One small boy pressed his hand against the screen, trying to touch the blue waves. These kids had never felt rain on their faces or grass under their feet. They had never seen a real bird fly or heard thunder rumble across open skies. A group of scouts returned through the airlock, their suits covered in red dust. They had been searching the old mining sites, looking for anything useful left behind. Jack read their disappointed faces before they even removed their helmets. Another failed mission. In his private quarters that evening, Jack studied the defense readouts. The Dominion didn't attack anymore. They didn't need to. They just waited, knowing that eventually the colony would fail. A broken pipe, a failed harvest, or a cracked dome would do their work for them. He pulled up the old videos, the ones showing Earth before the invasion. Green parks, busy streets, and blue oceans filled his screen. His great-grandfather had saved these recordings, passing them down along with the stories of how the Dominion came without warning. How their weapons made Earth's best defenses look like children's toys. How the lucky ones escaped to Mars while the rest. The colony's night cycle began, lights dimming to save power. Jack walked to his window, watching the staff change shifts in the hydroponic gardens. They grew the same bland vegetables every season, but no one complained anymore. The colonists had long stopped asking for more than survival. A child's drawing caught his eye, stuck to the corridor wall. It showed a blue and green Earth with smiling stick figures standing on it. Below, in uneven letters, it read, "Someday we'll go home." Jack touched the drawing gently. They had kept humanity alive on this red rock for 200 years, but survival wasn't enough anymore. The kids deserved more than recycled air and stories about a lost world. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the Martian horizon. Another dust storm approached, and with it would come more strain on their failing systems. Jack squared his shoulders and headed to help prepare the colony's defenses. They would survive this storm, just like they had survived hundreds before it. Because giving up wasn't an option. Earth was still out there, waiting. And as long as one human child still dreamed of blue skies, they would keep fighting. What no one in Mars Colony Beta knew was that at that very moment, at the edge of the solar system, humanity's long exile was about to end. Change was coming, riding on the wings of a warship that carried the answer to 2 centuries of prayers. The warning sirens woke Jack from his short sleep. Red lights flashed through the colony's corridors as he rushed to the control room. His heart pounded. They hadn't detected any Dominion ships in the solar system for nearly 5 years. The last time, they had barely survived. "What do we have?" he asked, entering the crowded room. Young Tom Reed, born and raised on Mars, worked quickly at the main sensor station. His fingers flew across the controls with the skill of someone who had trained for this moment his entire life. "Massive ship just appeared at the edge of Neptune's orbit," Tom reported, his voice steady despite his pale face. "But sir, something's different. It's not moving like a Dominion vessel." The room fell silent as the ship's image appeared on the main screen. It was huge, easily twice the size of any Dominion warship they had ever seen. Its dark hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making it look like a hole in space. But there was something familiar about its shape, something that tugged at Jack's memories of old Earth military files. Anna burst into the room, her tablet displaying energy readings. "The power signature. I've never seen anything like it. It's beyond anything the Dominion has." She paused, studying the data. "But these patterns, they remind me of old Earth fusion drives, just more advanced." The ship moved closer, passing Jupiter's orbit in a fraction of the time it should have taken. The colony's ancient defense systems came online automatically, but everyone knew their weapons would be useless against something that size. Years of drills had prepared them for this moment, but fear still filled the room. Then the impossible happened. "We're receiving a transmission," Tom announced, his hands shaking slightly. It's on an old Earth military frequency, one that hasn't been used since before the invasion." Jack's mouth went dry. "Play it." A deep voice filled the control room, speaking in clear, unaccented English. "Mars Colony Beta, this is Captain Robert Miller of the Earth Ship Remembrance. We've come home." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 200 years of exile had taught them that hope was dangerous. But there was something in that voice that made Jack's heart race with possibility. "It could be a trick," Anna whispered, but her eyes shined with held-back tears. Jack took a deep breath and pressed the transmit button. "This is Commander Jack Stone of Mars Colony Beta. Prove you're human." The answer came back immediately. When the Dominion came, Admiral Helen Chen led the last of Earth's space fleet in a fighting retreat. She promised to return. We are her great-grandchildren, keeping that promise. The name hit Jack like a physical blow. Every child in the colony knew that story. How Admiral Chen had sacrificed herself to let a handful of ships escape, carrying with them humanity's best scientists and engineers. The ships that disappeared into deep space, never to be heard from again. Until now. Requesting permission to approach and dock, Captain Miller continued. "We have supplies, medicine, and 2 centuries of advancement to share. It's time to take back what's ours." Jack looked around the control room. He saw the same mix of fear and desperate hope on every face. These people had spent their entire lives looking over their shoulders, expecting the Dominion to finally finish what they started. Now a ghost from Earth's past had returned, offering everything they had dreamed of. He made his decision. "Permission granted, Captain Miller. Welcome home." The massive ship moved into orbit around Mars, and for the first time in living memory, the red planet's sky held something other than fear for the people below. Through the observation dome's windows, colonists gathered to watch the ship grow larger. Parents lifted children to see better, pointing at the vessel that represented everything they had thought lost forever. As docking procedures began, Jack found himself looking at that child's drawing again, the one showing happy people on a blue and green Earth. He smiled, touching the faded paper gently. Maybe, just maybe, that dream wasn't so impossible after all. The long wait was over. Humanity's lost children had finally returned, and they had not come home empty-handed. The meeting room felt too small for the weight of history it now contained. Jack sat across from Captain Miller, studying the man who commanded humanity's most powerful warship. Miller looked nothing like the grand hero Jack had imagined. He wore a simple black uniform and had gentle eyes that had seen too much. "We found a home in the Horsehead Nebula," Miller explained, bringing up a hologram that filled the room with swirling stars. A cluster of 12 stars, rich in resources, hidden inside a dust cloud that blocked long-range scans. The Dominion never thought to look there. The images change, showing massive space stations and shipyards floating among the stars. Jack heard Anna gasp beside him. The technology was far beyond anything they had on Mars, yet somehow still recognizably human in design. "The first years were the hardest," Miller continued, his voice soft with remembered pain. "We had barely enough supplies to survive. Every ship was damaged from the escape. A third of our people died that first year, including my great-grandmother." He paused, touching an old metal kin to his chest. "But we refused to let Earth's legacy die with us." The hologram showed people working in huge manufacturing bays, building ships and weapons. "We studied every piece of Dominion technology we could salvage from our battles. We took it apart, learned how it worked, then made it better. They thought their technology was perfect. That made them lazy. We kept pushing, kept improving." Tom leaned forward, unable to contain his curiosity. "Your ship's hull, it absorbs sensor scans instead of reflecting them. We've never seen anything like it." Miller smiled. "Reverse engineered from a piece of Dominion armor, but we added our own tricks. They rely too much on their advanced technology. We remembered older methods too. Sometimes the simple solutions work best." The images changed again, showing training grounds where people practiced combat techniques. "We never forgot who we were or where we came from. Every child born in the fleet learns Earth's history, its military traditions, its sciences. We kept everything. Music, art, literature. We made sure they knew what we were fighting to return to." "How many survived?" Anna asked quietly. 12 ships escaped Earth that day, carrying 26,000 people. Miller's eyes showed pride now. "Today, we have over 2 million spread across 15 space stations and 3 asteroid colonies, and a fleet of 300 warships, each one carrying the same promise: to return home." Jack watched the hologram show dozens of ships under construction. "Why now? After 200 years, why come back today?" Miller's face grew serious. "We've been watching, gathering intelligence. The Dominion is fighting wars on 6 fronts. They've spread themselves too thin, grown overconfident, and they never bothered to fortify Earth properly. Why should they? They thought they'd broken humanity's spirit." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the red Martian landscape. "But most importantly, we detected your colony's power readings growing weaker. We knew we had to return before." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "What about the other colonies?" Jack asked. "Mercury base, the Jupiter stations." Miller's silence was answer enough. Mars Colony Beta was the last one standing. All the others had failed over the centuries, their people either dying or surrendering to the Dominion's rule. "We're going to need your help," Miller said finally. "Your people know this solar system better than anyone. You've watched the Dominion's patrol patterns, studied their habits. Together, we can take back Earth." A small alert sounded, and Miller checked his wrist display. "The first supply ships will dock in an hour. Medical supplies, fresh food, new power cells for your systems." He smiled warmly. "And something special, real coffee. 2 centuries old, but we kept the seeds alive." Jack felt tears in his eyes. Such a small thing, but it meant everything. Their lost family had not only survived, they had preserved humanity's heritage, its knowledge, its very soul. And they had turned their exile into strength. "When do we start?" Jack asked, standing up straighter than he had in years. Miller's eyes hardened with determination. "We already have. The Dominion sensors can't detect our ships. Right now, the rest of the fleet is moving into position throughout the solar system. In 1 week, we take back what's ours." Outside the window, the massive ship hung against the stars like a promise kept. Humanity had not only survived its exile, it had turned it into the weapon that would bring them home. The colony's old meeting hall had turned into a war room. Holograms filled the air with maps of the solar system, showing the positions of Dominion patrols in red and the hidden fleet ships in blue. Jack watched Tom explain to Captain Miller how the Mars colonists had tracked enemy movements for generations. "They always follow the same paths," Tom said, his fingers tracing lines through the hologram. "Every 32 days, they change their patrol routes, but they only use 6 different patterns. They've gotten lazy, comfortable. They think they know every hiding spot in the system." Miller nodded, his eyes narrowing as he studied the patterns. "But they don't know about the spots you found." He turned to Anna, who was reviewing data from the fleet sensors. "How many blind zones have your people mapped?" Anna pulled up a new overlay, showing dozens of dark spots scattered throughout the solar system. "We call them shadow paths, areas where the solar winds and magnetic fields create natural interference. The Dominion sensors can't see through them, so they avoid these regions completely." "Perfect attack corridors," Miller said, a smile forming on his face. "And you've tested these paths?" "For 200 years, Jack confirmed. Our supply runners used them to stay hidden, gathering resources from the asteroid belt. We've mapped every magnetic storm, every radiation cloud, every gravitational eddy that could hide a ship." The door opened and Bill, the colony's oldest resident, walked in slowly with help from his grandson. "I heard you wanted to know about the Earth defense grid," the old man said, his voice shaking but his eyes sharp. Miller helped Bill to a chair. The old man had been just a boy during the invasion, but his memory was still clear. His hands moved through the hologram, marking points around Earth. They kept most of the old human satellites, repaired them, modified them, but they never replaced them. Too much work, they thought. Why bother? "Because they never expected us to come back," Miller finished. He looked at his own datapad. "Our scans confirm it. They're still using the same basic defense network from 200 years ago. They've upgraded the weapons, but the detection grid is almost unchanged." Jack felt hope rising in his chest. "And you know how to beat it. Better." Miller's smile grew wider. "We helped design it. The original Earth defense grid. Our ancestors built it. Everything the Dominion modified was based on our own technology. They never fully understood how it worked. They just made it stronger." Anna caught on first, her eyes widening. "You know its blind spots, the weaknesses built into the original design. Every system has a back door," Miller confirmed. 200 years ago, Earth's military leaders insisted on building in hidden weaknesses, ways to shut down the grid if it was ever turned against us. The Dominion found and fixed most of them, but not all. Not the ones written in plain sight. He brought up an image of old Earth code, lines scrolling past. "We hid the most important backdoors in the basic operating protocols, made them look like normal safety features. The Dominion's arrogance worked in our favor. They never imagined primitive humans could have built in something they couldn't detect." The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. The Dominion had spent 2 centuries sitting behind defenses they didn't fully understand, growing more complacent with each passing year. "Here's the plan," Miller said, expanding the hologram to show the entire inner solar system. "We split our forces into 12 battle groups. Each one uses your shadow paths to move into position. When we strike, we hit every major Dominion installation simultaneously. They'll never have time to organize a response." Tom studied the plan, adding notes about patrol timing. "We'll need perfect coordination. Split-second timing." "That's where you come in," Miller told him. "Your people know their patterns better than anyone. You'll coordinate the approach vectors, guide our ships through the blind spots." Jack looked at the battle plan taking shape before them. It was audacious, maybe even crazy, but it might just work. The Dominion would never expect an attack from the shadows they'd ignored for centuries. What about Earth itself? Anna asked softly. What will we find down there? Miller's face grew serious. Our scouts report they never fully colonized it. They keep most of the surface as a nature preserve, with only a few major bases. They think it's beneath them to live on a planet they stole from primitives. He almost spat the last word. Then let's remind them who that planet belongs to, Jack said, standing straighter. Around him, faces hardened with determination. 2 centuries of watching, waiting, and surviving had led to this moment. The time for hiding was over. Now it was time to fight. Silent as shadows, humanity's ships slipped through the dark spaces between worlds. Tom's voice guided them through the secret paths that Mars' colony had mapped across 2 centuries. No Dominion patrol noticed the fleet of warships moving steadily closer to their target. In the command center of the Remembrance, Jack stood beside Captain Miller, watching the tactical display. 300 ships, split into 12 battle groups, all moving in perfect coordination. The Dominion's sensor nets showed nothing but empty space and standard background radiation. Battle Group 7 through the Jupiter shadow, Tom reported from his station. His fingers danced across the controls, coordinating the fleet's movement through magnetic storms and radiation fields that fooled enemy sensors. Battle Group 3 using the Venus thermal blind. All ships on schedule. Anna monitored the Dominion's communications from her post. No alerts. Their patrols are maintaining standard patterns. They don't see us coming. Miller checked the time. 10 minutes to synchronized attack range. All ships, final weapons check. His voice was calm, but his hands gripped the command rail tightly. 200 years of preparation came down to these next few moments. The bridge crew worked in focused silence. Most of them had trained their entire lives for this day, but none had ever faced real combat. The last human to fight the Dominion had died generations ago. 5 minutes, Tom announced. All ships in final attack position. Jack watched the tactical display as the fleet emerged from their hidden approaches, forming a perfect sphere around Earth's orbital defenses. The Dominion's mighty defense grid still showed nothing but empty space. Their own arrogance had blinded them. 2 minutes. Miller's voice was steady. Prepare main weapons. Remember your training. Remember Earth. The seconds counted down. Jack thought of the children in Mars' colony, who had never seen a blue sky, of the generations who had lived and died in exile, of all they had lost and all they might regain. Execute. 300 ships dropped their stealth fields simultaneously. Before the Dominion sensors could even register their presence, humanity's fleet opened fire. Advanced weapons, born from 2 centuries of hidden development, struck with devastating precision. The Dominion's orbital platforms, their mighty defense grid, began to fall. The backdoors hidden in their ancient programming activated, shutting down shield generators and weapon systems. Stations that had stood guard over Earth for 2 centuries went dark in seconds. First wave successful, Tom reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Orbital defenses at 12% and falling. Enemy ships launching from lunar base. The Dominion's response was slow, confused. Their mighty warships, unused to real combat after centuries of peaceful occupation, emerged from their bases in a disorganized mass. They had forgotten the art of war. The humans had not. Battle Group 4, engage lunar forces, Miller commanded. Groups 6 and 8, maintain orbital suppression. All other groups, commence secondary targeting. Deploy the new weapons. The fleet's ships moved with practiced precision, their formations flowing like water around the enemy's clumsy counterattacks. Dominion weapons, designed to overwhelm through sheer power, found themselves striking nothing but empty space as human ships danced through their firing solutions. They're transmitting distress calls, Anna reported. Long-range communications being jammed per plan. They can't call for help. The battle spread across Earth's orbit like a dance of light and shadow. Dominion ships, mighty but predictable, fell one by one to human tactics they had never seen before. The fleet struck from impossible angles, using maneuvers that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Lunar base neutralized, Tom announced. Orbital defenses offline. Enemy fleet at 60% losses and falling. Miller allowed himself a small smile. Launch ground assault teams. Begin Operation Homecoming. Smaller ships detached from the fleet, streaking toward Earth's atmosphere. The Dominion's ground bases, designed to resist bombardment from above, had no defense against precision landing teams using paths calculated by generations of Mars colonists. "Sir," Anna's voice cut through the battle chatter. "We're picking up signals from the surface, from hidden bunkers and underground bases. There are humans down there. Survivors. They're fighting back." Jack felt his heart jump. After 2 centuries of occupation, Earth's surface still held secrets, still held hope. "Send the signal," Miller ordered. "Tell every human on Earth, we're coming home." The battle for Earth had begun, and humanity was winning. The landing ship shook as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Jack gripped his harness tighter, looking at the strike team around him. Young men and women from Mars Colony sat next to hardened warriors from the fleet, all united by a single purpose: to set foot on the world their ancestors had lost. Through the viewport, Jack saw the curve of Earth growing larger. Blue oceans and green continents emerged from the clouds, so much color after a lifetime of Martian red. Beside him, Tom stared in wonder at his first view of humanity's homeworld. "Ground defense systems inactive," the pilot announced. "Landing zone clear. 30 seconds to touchdown." They had chosen their landing site carefully. A Dominion command base built on the ruins of Old Washington. Intelligence from the hidden human survivors confirmed it was the enemy's primary control center for the entire North American continent. The ship touched down softly on a grassy field that had once been a city park. As the ramp lowered, Jack smelled his first breath of Earth air, rich with the scent of plants and soil and rain. Several of the Mars-born soldiers paused, overwhelmed by the sensation. "Move out," Jack ordered, pushing aside his own emotions. "Secure the perimeter." The strike team spread out across the field, their advanced weapons ready. The Dominion base rose before them, its crystalline towers gleaming in the morning sun. But something was wrong. There was no resistance, no response to their landing. "Sir," Tom called out, pointing to movement at the base's main gate. A group of figures emerged, but they weren't Dominion soldiers. They were humans, dressed in patchwork clothing, carrying a mix of old Earth weapons and stolen Dominion technology. An old woman stepped forward from the group. Her face was weathered, but her eyes were sharp and fierce. "Took you long enough to come back," she said with a grim smile. "We've been keeping this place warm for you." Jack's team raised their weapons as Dominion soldiers finally appeared on the base walls, but the old woman waved them down. "Don't bother. They're dead. Have been for an hour. We've been fighting from the underground since our grandparents' time, waiting for this day." More humans emerged from hidden entrances around the base. Hundreds of them. The surface survivors had built an entire hidden world beneath the Dominion's feet, preserving their strength and knowledge through generations of secret resistance. The Dominion never bothered to look closely at their human pets, the old woman explained as she led them into the base. Bodies of alien soldiers lay in the corridors, taken by surprise when the orbital attack began. They thought they'd broken us, thought we were just simple servants, maintaining their buildings, growing their food. They never imagined we were building an army right under their noses. Inside the command center, Anna quickly accessed the base's systems. The screen showed similar scenes playing out across the planet. Hidden human resistance cells emerged everywhere, striking at Dominion installations the moment the space battle began. 2 centuries of quiet preparation unleashed in a single coordinated uprising. "How many of you are there?" Jack asked, still amazed by what he was seeing. "Millions," the old woman answered proudly. "Living in underground cities and mountain hideouts, in deep-sea bases they never found. We kept having children, kept teaching them our history, kept planning for this day. Earth never stopped being ours. We just let them think they had won. Reports flooded in from around the world. The Dominion's hold on Earth had been more fragile than anyone had imagined. They had never truly occupied the planet, maintaining only a few thousand bases to extract resources and show their dominance. Their arrogance had been their weakness. London secured. Tom read from the incoming messages. Beijing responding. Moscow clear. Rio de Janeiro in human hands. Sydney reports all Dominion forces neutralized. Miller's voice came through their comms. Orbital space secured. Enemy fleet destroyed or surrendered. Earth is ours again. Jack walked to a window, looking out at the city beyond the base. The ruins of old Washington were already coming alive with people emerging from hiding. Children ran in the streets, looking up at the sky where human ships now flew freely. "Send word to Mars Colony," he ordered. "Tell them to prepare for evacuation. Tell them," he paused, watching the sun rise over a free Earth. "Tell them we're finally home." 2 centuries of exile had ended, but more importantly, they had discovered a truth that filled them with pride. Humanity had never truly been conquered. They had simply been waiting, growing stronger, preparing for the day they would take back their world. 1 month after the liberation, transport ships landed in an open field outside the restored Washington Command Center. Jack watched as families from Mars Colony took their first steps on Earth, their faces filled with wonder at the open sky above them. Children who had never known anything but red dust and sealed corridors ran through real grass, laughing as they felt wind on their faces. Tom stood next to him, holding a handful of soil. "It feels different than the samples we studied," he said quietly. "More alive." A bird landed nearby, and he stared at it with wide eyes. Living creatures that flew freely were still new to him, to all of them. The old woman from the Resistance, who they now knew as Mary, worked with Anna to help the Mars colonists adjust. "Your bodies will need time to adapt," she explained to a group of wide-eyed children. "Earth's gravity, the air, the food, it's all different from what you're used to. But this is what we were built for. Your bodies remember, even if you've never been here." In the distance, ships from the fleet continued their work, removing the last traces of Dominion technology from orbit. The enemy had retreated to the edges of known space, their empire shaken by the loss of Earth. Their messages of surrender still spoke of confusion, unable to understand how the primitive humans they had exiled had returned so strong. Miller walked through the crowd, stopping to help an elderly Mars colonist who struggled with Earth's stronger gravity. "The Dominion's withdrawal is complete," he reported to Jack. "Our deep space sensors show their fleets pulling back from all human claimed systems. They're running. They never understood us," Jack replied, watching more families arrive from Mars. "They thought splitting us up would make us weaker. Instead, it made us stronger." Mars Colony learned to survive against impossible odds. The fleet built themselves into a power that could challenge an empire. Earth's people never stopped fighting. Bill, the old man from Mars who had helped plan the liberation, sat in a chair under a tree, tears running down his face as he touched its bark. "Just like I remembered," he whispered. The trees, the clouds, the smell of rain coming. Young children from Earth's hidden cities gathered around him, eager to hear stories about Mars and the lost fleet. Near the landing zone, scientists from all 3 groups of humanity worked together, sharing their different types of knowledge. The Mars colonists brought their expertise in survival and resource management. The fleet provided their advanced technology. Earth's resistance shared their deep understanding of the planet's restored ecosystems and how to live in harmony with them. "We're already getting requests," Anna said, joining Jack and Miller. "Other worlds that want to break free from the Dominion. They saw what we did. We showed them it's possible to fight back." Miller nodded. "The fleet will help them. But Earth comes first. We have a lot to rebuild." A shout went up from the crowd as the first drops of rain began to fall. Mars-born children ran around in circles, trying to catch the drops on their tongues. Their parents stood with faces turned up to the sky, feeling real rain for the first time in their lives. Even the battle-hardened fleet crews stopped to enjoy the moment. Jack remembered the child's drawing from Mars Colony, the one showing people standing on a blue and green Earth. That child's simple dream had come true. But they had gained more than just their planet back. Humanity had found itself again, stronger for its time apart, richer for having 3 different stories to share. In the command center, they had set up a memorial wall. On it hung pictures of all those who had died keeping hope alive through 2 centuries of exile. The Mars colonists who gave their lives to keep the colony running, the fleet crews lost in deep space battles, the resistance fighters who died never knowing if help would come. Below the pictures, someone had written, "They kept faith in tomorrow." As the sun set on another day on free Earth, Jack looked at the 3 different groups of humans coming together as one again. Mars Colony was empty now, its people finally home. The fleet's mighty ships would soon leave to help others fight for freedom. Earth's hidden armies could finally step into the light. 2 centuries ago, one empire had tried to break humanity by driving them from their home. Instead, they had created something stronger. 3 branches of the same tree, growing in different directions, but always reaching for the same sky. Now those branches had come together again, and their roots grew deep in Earth's soil. The exile was over, but its legacy would live forever in the stories they would tell their children. Stories of Mars Colony's endurance, of the fleet's long journey home, of Earth's quiet resistance, stories of how humanity had turned its darkest moment into its greatest triumph.